Alexandria, 150 AD. A Roman cartographer named Marinus of Tyre is staring at the edge of his map. He knows the world doesn't stop there. He just doesn't know what comes next. In our timeline, Rome falls. 476 AD. The Western Empire collapses, and the ocean stays uncharted for another 1,000 years. But what if it didn't? What if the empire held, patched together, restructured, but alive? That's the divergence. Not a single battle. A century of slow reform that keeps the Western administration breathing. From here we cut between both worlds, the real one, and the one that kept going west. Real world, 500 AD. Western Europe is fragmenting. Latin is dissolving into dialects. Roads are crumbling. Alternate world, same year. The Western Senate is still meeting in Rome. Grain taxes are being collected. The bureaucracy complains loudly, but it functions. This is actually plausible. The Eastern Empire, Byzantium, ran for another 1,000 years after 476 with basically the same Roman infrastructure. The West just needed slightly less bad luck. A competent general here, a treaty that held there. Real world, 700 AD. Islam is expanding across North Africa and the Middle East. The Arab world is becoming the center of global trade and scholarship. Alternate world, 700 AD. Rome still controls the Mediterranean coastline. The Arab expansion still happens. You can't stop that, but it runs into organized resistance earlier. This doesn't prevent Islam. It redirects it. Instead of North Africa falling, you get a longer stalemate, more trade negotiation, less outright conquest. Real world, 900 AD. The Vikings are reaching Iceland, Greenland, and then, briefly, North America, Vineland. They don't stay. Alternate world, 900 AD. Here's where things get genuinely interesting. A Rome that's still intact has better ships by now. Sustained naval investment for 400 extra years. Roman engineers are methodical. They don't explore, they develop. A route to Iceland is established for fishing. Then Greenland. Then, following similar currents, the Norse already mapped, westward. Around 980 AD, in this alternate world, a Roman supply fleet makes landfall on what we'd call Newfoundland. They call it, and this part I'm speculating obviously, Terra Borealis, the northern land. Real world, 980 AD. Leif Erikson is doing the same thing. He also plans a settlement. It lasts maybe 10 years before conflict with indigenous peoples and supply problems force them out. The Norse couldn't sustain it. Too few people, too far from home, no institutional backing. Rome doesn't have that problem. The empire's entire identity is rooted in occupation and administration. They build roads before they build anything else. That's been the pattern in Britain, in Gaul, in North Africa. You put down roads, then forts, then towns. Real world, 1400 AD. The Americas are home to millions of people. The Mississippian culture, the Aztec Empire forming, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy in the Northeast. These aren't primitive societies. Cahokia, near modern-day St. Louis, has a population larger than London in 1000 AD. Think about that. Alternate world, same period. Roman scouts are moving south along the coastline. They encounter the Haudenosaunee. 5 nations, sophisticated diplomacy, a political structure Rome actually recognizes. Rome has dealt with federated peoples before. The Germanic tribes, the Gauls. Sometimes it negotiates, sometimes it conquers. Usually both. The contact is brutal in some places. Let's not pretend otherwise. Rome's record on conquered peoples is complicated at best. But here's a key difference from the 1492 contact we know. Rome doesn't bring smallpox. That disease complex that devastated American populations starting in the 1500s. It arrives later, slower, in smaller doses. The disease gap between Europe and the Americas in 1492 was 500 years of close contact with domesticated animals. Rome in 980 AD still had that gap, but it was smaller. 500 years smaller. The death rate from introduced disease would still be catastrophic, but survivable in a way that left political structures standing. Real world, 1095 AD. The First Crusade is launched. Europe's excess military energy turns east. Alternate world, 1095 AD. There are no crusades, or rather a surviving Western Roman Empire redirected that energy differently. The frontier isn't Jerusalem, it's the West. A second wave of colonists, not explorers, colonists, lands on the North American coast around 1100 AD. 10,000 people, with engineers, soldiers, administrators, and seeds. They're carrying wheat, olive trees, grapevines, and the Roman model of the castrum, the garrison town that becomes a city. Real world, 1200 AD. The Mongol Empire is reshaping Eurasia. The Black Death is 3 centuries away. Europe is growing, but slowly. Alternate world, 1200 AD. Nova Roma, the first permanent Roman city in North America, is established at what we call the mouth of the Hudson River. Population, 30,000. It's not Manhattan, it's closer to a Roman provincial capital. Think Roman era Cologne or York. There are aqueducts within 40 years. There are always aqueducts. Relations with the Haudenosaunee are transactional and tense. Rome offers trade goods, metalwork, glass, textiles. It wants land and labor. A familiar dynamic. Real world, 1300s. The Black Death kills 1 in 3 Europeans. It reshapes labor markets, breaks feudalism's grip, accelerates the Renaissance. Alternate world, 1300s. The Black Death still happens. No alternate history stops the Mongols from moving west. But here, Rome has American silver. Wait, does North America have silver? Yes, massively. The regions we know as Nevada, Colorado, Mexico's enormous deposits, and Rome knows how to mine. American silver starts flowing east. It doesn't stop the Black Death, but it softens the economic collapse that follows it. Real world, 1400s. Europe recovers. Print technology, gunpowder, a renewed hunger for trade routes. Alternate world, 1400s. The Roman presence in North America is now 3 centuries old. It's not an empire anymore. Empires this far from Rome can be governed from the center. What's emerged is closer to Byzantine provinces, nominally Roman, culturally distinct, doing their own thing while sending tribute back across the ocean. The language is a creolized Latin, mixed with Haudenosaunee, with Algonquin, with whatever the Romans picked up over 300 years of contact. Real world, 1492. Columbus lands in the Bahamas. He thinks he's in Asia. He's wrong. It doesn't matter. The connection is made. Alternate world, 1492. The Atlantic is already a known route. Nova Roma is a city of 200,000, smaller than London but growing faster. Spain and Portugal still exist in this world, obviously, and they're still looking west. But when their ships arrive, they don't find empty coastlines. They find a Roman city with walls and a garrison. They find a Roman governor who speaks Latin, barely the same Latin as them, but recognizably Latin. This is actually one of the most interesting moments in the alternate timeline, because Spain doesn't conquer this. You don't conquer Rome. What you get instead is negotiation, rivalry, and trade agreements. A very European outcome, just happening on American soil 500 years earlier. Real world, 1500s. Hernan Cortés destroys the Aztec Empire. Francisco Pizarro destroys the Inca. The population of the Americas drops by an estimated 90% within a century. 90%. That's not a statistic that's easy to sit with. That civilization's gone. Alternate world, 1500s. Rome knows Central and South America exist. Traders have moved south along the coast for a century. Contact with the Aztec Empire happens. But here's the key. The Aztec already have partial immunity. 200 years of slow disease diffusion from Roman settlements in the north. The Aztec Empire doesn't survive the contact intact. The disruption is still massive, but is not annihilated. What emerges is closer to what Rome did with Egypt, a Roman-administered state that keeps a lot of local structure. Real world, 1600s. English, French, Dutch colonists are flooding North America's eastern seaboard. They're building colonies with one specific idea at the center: settlement without Rome, without a king far away. Eventually. Alternate world, 1600s. There's no empty seaboard to colonize. England and France still try. They establish trading posts in what we'd call Canada and the Pacific Northwest. But the 13 colonies as we know them, they can't happen. The land is occupied. There is no 1776, no Declaration of Independence, no American Revolution. That specific experiment in Enlightenment governance, it doesn't exist in this form. And here's where you have to stop and ask yourself, is that worse? The American Republic came out of a very specific set of ideas. Some of those ideas were genuinely new, but the Republic also enshrined the slavery in its founding document. Real world. By 1860, 4 million enslaved people are in the American South. By 1860, in the alternate world, slavery still exists. Rome ran on slave labor, and these western provinces carry that system. This is not a better world by that measure, it's just differently structured suffering. Geography of oppression changes. Scale and specific populations, harder to say. What the alternate world does avoid is the specific demographic catastrophe of post-1492 contact. 90% population collapse. It probably doesn't happen here. Real world, 1776. The United States declares itself a nation. The idea of self-governance as a right radiates outward, eventually influencing independence movements everywhere. Alternate world, 1776. Nova Roma is now a city of 800,000, larger than Paris. The western provinces have their own senate. Technically under Rome, functionally not. The Enlightenment still happens in this world. It's not an American invention, it's a European one. Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, all of that still occurs. But where those ideas land, and who's in a position to act on them, changes completely. Real world, 1800s, industrialization, steam power, railways crisscross the American continent, manifest destiny. An empire building itself, not admitting it's an empire. Alternate world, 1800s. Rome industrializes differently. It has centuries of infrastructure. It's also more rigid. Rome's economic model resisted innovation in ways that feudal Europe's chaos actually didn't. The steam engine probably still gets invented. It was invented in ancient Alexandria once, as a toy. But the economic incentive to scale it is different when you have millions of enslaved people doing the labor. The Industrial Revolution here is slower, more localized. The western provinces lead it. They're farther from Rome's conservatism. They've adapted more. Real world, 1900. The United States is the world's largest economy. It's about to be pulled into a global war it didn't start but can't ignore. Alternate world, 1900. The western provinces, let's call them what they've become, the Occidental territories, are approaching independence, not declaring it. Approaching it, slowly, the way Canada did. There's no clean break. There's a series of constitutional reforms between 1880 and 1920 that progressively reduce Rome's governance power in the West. Real world, 1914-1918, the First World War. The United States enters late, tips the balance, emerges as the dominant global power. Alternate world, same period. The war still happens. Nationalism and imperial rivalry don't require America to exist. Germany is still Germany. Austria-Hungary is still a mess. But the Occidental territories don't enter the war in the same way. They're not a unified nation. They can't project military power across the Atlantic with the same speed. The war probably still ends around the same time. The logistics of sustaining trench warfare have a ceiling regardless. But the post-war order is entirely different. No American-dominated peace settlement. No Wilson. No League of Nations structured around American liberal idealism. Something more Roman, provincial governance, tributary states, negotiated hierarchies. Real world, 1939-1945. The Second World War, the Holocaust, Hiroshima. The entire moral vocabulary of the 20th century gets built on those events. Alternate world, 1939. Does the Holocaust happen? This is one of the hardest questions. Nazi ideology was specifically about a German identity humiliated by the 1918 peace settlement. A different 1918 settlement means a different Germany in the 1930s. Probably still unstable. Economic depression is global, not American specific. But the specific shape of fascism changes. The most likely outcome is a European war that's still horrific. Nationalism plus industrial weaponry equals mass death. That's basically a law of history, but differently configured. Real world, 1945. America invents the atomic bomb, drops it twice. The nuclear age begins with American hands on the trigger. Alternate world, 1945. Physics doesn't change. Einstein's work still happens. Someone develops nuclear weapons. Most likely a combination of Roman and Northern European research labs. Who uses it first, and on whom? That's where speculation gets genuinely dangerous. I won't pretend to know. Real world, present. The United States is a nation of 335 million people. It has the world's largest military, the world's largest entertainment industry, and the world's reserve currency. It's also carrying a legacy of racial violence, mass incarceration, a healthcare system that kills people who can't pay, and political polarization that's genuinely hard to explain to anyone outside it. Alternate world, present. What's there? Not one country, not even two. The American landmass is divided between the Occidental territories, a loose federal structure, culturally Latin American indigenous in ways hard to even imagine, and a patchwork of city states and regional federations across the interior. There's no singular superpower. Europe is more powerful relative to everything else. The Middle East probably looks completely different. No oil economy built around American demand shaping its politics. China's trajectory is hard to predict. It doesn't need America to rise, but American demand has shaped modern Chinese industrialization enormously. The internet almost certainly doesn't exist in the same form. It emerged from American military research and American corporate infrastructure. Without those, something networked might exist, but not this. And here's the question you've been waiting for. Which world is better? The honest answer is neither. Both are terrible in specific ways. Both have war, hierarchy, exploitation. The alternate world probably kills fewer people in the 1490-1600 period. That's not small. That's tens of millions of lives. The real world gave us the specific intellectual tradition that produced the Declaration of Independence, the French Revolution, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Those ideas came from somewhere. The question is whether a Roman North America gets there anyway, or whether a different moral vocabulary emerges, one we literally can't imagine. What this whole exercise keeps pointing at is something uncomfortable. The world you live in is not the result of the best ideas winning. It's the result of specific accidents. The Roman Empire's collapse was an accident. The speed of Spanish colonization was an accident. The specific disease ecology that made 1492 so catastrophic was an accident. Somewhere in an alternate Alexandria, a cartographer is looking at his map. The ocean is blank on the right side. He's wondering what's out there. He doesn't know. And that blank space, that unknowing, is the most honest thing about all of this.